It's literally impossible to read One Piece blindly today. My entire feed for the last 2 years has just been white-haired Luffy laughing like a maniac, Gear 5 edits with heavy bass, and people screaming peak fiction at a wall, so I finally caved. I wanted to see if this 1,000-chapter monster is actually worth the time, or if everyone is just blinded by nostalgia. But going from modern internet hype back to Chapter 1, it is a massive fever dream. You expect this legendary, god-tier masterpiece immediately, and instead, you get a goofy rubber kid floating in a literal barrel. It feels like a completely different comic, and honestly, the story completely traps you. Because let's be honest, the first few arcs are kind of a slog. Romance Dawn and Buggy felt like a standard Saturday morning cartoon. By the time I hit Syrup Village, I was genuinely about to close the tab and drop it. Usopp was giving major annoying NPC energy, just running around screaming. But then Oda drops his backstory out of nowhere, and the vibe completely flips, finding out this kid only started lying because his dad abandoned him and his mom was terminally ill. He was just running through the streets screaming, "The pirates are coming," to try and give his dying mother some hope that her husband was coming back to save her. Like, that is actually heavy. And seeing this weak, terrified liar stand his ground against a whole pirate crew while the town he's saving treats him like a clown? That was the exact moment I realized the internet wasn't lying about the depth here. The author just masks it under goofy character designs. But if Syrup Village made me stay, the Baratie arc is where I started to get some interest in series. First off, Sanji feeding a starving enemy just because they're hungry is such a clean introduction. He instantly became a favorite, but I was not prepared for Mihawk to pull up this early. Usually, final boss characters stay hidden for like 500 chapters. This man casually shows up, pulls out a tiny pocket knife, and completely deletes Zoro's aura. You suddenly realize Luffy and Zoro aren't these overpowered main characters, they are just tiny fish in a terrifyingly massive ocean. But that Zoro moment right after, when he's bleeding out, holding his sword up to the sky, crying his eyes out and promising Luffy, "I will never lose again." Bro, I got actual chills. Then we hit Arlong Park, which the internet hypes up as the definitive click moment. They weren't lying. The emotional damage here is insane. Nami's betrayal felt like a gut punch, but finding out she was enslaved by fishmen to buy back her village made it so much worse. The breaking point for me is when she finally snaps, sobbing and literally stabbing her own shoulder to rip out Arlong's tattoo. And Luffy doesn't ask for an explanation or some long backstory. He just stops her hand, puts his prized straw hat on her head, and screams, "Of course I will!" It's such simple, impactful writing. Luffy doesn't need a 20-minute monologue about justice. He just sees his friend crying and decides to go tear down a fortress. Finishing up at Logtown around chapter 100 was the perfect end to the prologue. The standout moment is obviously Luffy on the execution tower. When he's seconds from getting his head chopped off, he doesn't cry or beg, he just smiles at the crowd and accepts death. Knowing where he ends up later with all that godly Gear 5 power, seeing him right here, completely helpless but smiling at his own demise, is wild. Luffy isn't a generic hero. There is something deeply unhinged and fascinating about his lack of fear. They're entering the Grand Line now, and the world is breaking wide open. I went into this expecting a little overrated show, but I'm leaving chapter 100 genuinely hooked. Drop a like if you remember reading this before the internet spoiled everything, and sub to join the crew while I catch up. Let me know in the comments, does the next 100 chapters actually keep this same energy, or am I heading back into a grind?